The Iron Giant is the perfect family movie. It's funny, it's charming, but it also deals with these heavy topics like death, trauma, and identity. It's broken down and conveyed simply enough that kids can get the point while having deep enough subtext that adults can appreciate and feel impacted as well. I genuinely hate the term kids movie because it implies that kids can't handle or comprehend layered subject matter, and I just don't believe that to be true. Maybe they don't understand every little nuance, but they notice, retain, and internalize a lot more than given credit for.
Welcome to downtown Coolsville. Population? Us.
What's going on, y'all? It's Eddie, and over the next handful of videos, I want to continue to dive into movies that tackle the theme of identity, and The Iron Giant is the perfect movie to continue that exploration. Like most great movies, this one was also based on a book. The source material was a British novel called The Iron Man, which they changed here in the US for obvious Marvel reasons. Now, if you've ever watched a video essay, you're probably used to hearing really hyperbolic language like, "Let me tell you why this unpopular movie is not just a masterpiece, but also one of the most important works of the 21st century." To be honest, those types of videos legit make me want to make a burner account just to write hate comments. But I do think this film is a masterclass in storytelling as well as extremely high quality 2D animation on a shoestring budget. But the most important part of this film to me is its themes.
It's dead.
I wouldn't consider The Iron Giant to be a sad movie by any means, but it has this lurking and almost ominous exploration of death. It's quite literally woven into almost every aspect of this movie. If it was made today, there would be a bunch of political YouTubers disguised as movie critics calling it woke, saying it's anti-guns and anti-war, and although that could be argued, I would say that's a very surface level takeaway. In my opinion, this film asks way more questions than it makes statements, and I think it uses the war setting to question that shoot first, ask questions later mentality that we tend to idolize in our media. The novel was written to help the author's kids cope with the loss of their mother, and I can only assume that Brad Bird losing his sister in an act of gun violence played a role in him gravitating towards this movie, hence the idea for his movie pitch.
But I wanted to take it in a different direction, and I pitched that direction to Warner Brothers, and the direction was, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And that's different from the book.
If you don't mind me being candid, I've always struggled with the idea of death. Not just as a reality that we're all going to face, but even as a concept. I honestly can't wrap my mind around the idea that one day I'll just cease to exist. On one hand, it's like the most natural thing on earth, right? Without it, there'd be no sense of urgency in life. But on the other hand, it just feels so unimaginable. I think that's why I gravitated towards Hogarth's character so much as a kid. He presumably lost his father at such a young age, but was able to keep this youthful innocence. The type of innocence that I just wish I was able to hold on to for a little bit longer. I know it's such a random thing to praise, but I really love how Hogarth just genuinely feels like a kid in this film. Not a quippy adult trapped in a kid's body. But beyond Hogarth's youthful spirit, I love that he also has this really mature, profound, and great insight on life and death. And adding to the lurking feeling of death in this movie is the Cold War setting. In the same way we did fire drills and tornado drills as a kid, Hogarth and his classmates have to watch videos on how to survive an atomic bomb.
Hands over your head, keep low to the ground. Time to duck and cover, the bombs are coming down.
Jesus Christ.
The kids in Hogarth's class discuss what they would do if Russians invaded as carefree and as jovially as you and I might discuss playing a game of pickup basketball. We all have to deal with our mortality, but it's a different feeling knowing that dying at any second is not just possible, but also likely probable. Life is ironic. I started writing this section of this video December 9th, 2024. And on that day while I'm at work, I just keep getting these texts and calls, and I finally answer to find out that my aunt passed. Literally on the day that I'm writing about coping with loss, my aunt passes. If this was 2 years or even a year ago, I'd be really down because a death in the family, especially around the holidays, usually just puts me in this doom and gloom. And over the past 6 or 7 years, I've had a significant family member or friend pass away one by one. And it's honestly done a lot to my mental. So I don't know if it's because I've watched this film 10 times in preparation for this video, or if I'm just getting older and a little more comfortable with the idea of my own mortality. But I was surprisingly okay, much more okay than I would have been. Because I used to look at death like this monster or this thief in the night that just comes and takes away your hopes and dreams and everyone you love. As I was continuing to write this section after her funeral, Hogarth's words just kept repeating in my head.
Things die. It's part of life. It's bad to kill, but it's not bad to die.
I think using a robot to explore identity and programming was a really brilliant idea. Now, we usually think about programming in terms of an overtly negative way. Like the government is trying to program you to not ask questions and be a drone. But in reality, we receive all types of programming in our youth, from the TV shows we watch, the comic books we read, as well as our environment and the upbringing of our parents. So although Hogarth is a kid, he essentially has to take on a parent-like role. He's not just teaching the Iron Giant some new words, but he's also programming and reprogramming him with certain virtues. And what character better to help with that than Superman? Regardless of the shameless plug, it still works nonetheless. Hogarth tells the Iron Giant that Superman is from space just like him, and he's a very powerful being that only uses his powers for good and to help people. The Iron Giant notices a comic book next to the Superman book, and this cover has a big metallic monster destroying the city on it. It resembles him a lot more than Superman does. There's a deleted scene that I'm glad didn't make the final cut of the movie, but I'm also happy it exists. The scene would have made the movie's messaging feel a little bit conflicting, but it provides a lot of extra layers. We find out that the Iron Giant was actually sent to Earth to destroy the planet. On top of that, he's not the only one. There's hundreds and maybe even thousands of them. The Iron Giant was literally created to kill and destroy. He's a big weapon, or what Dean calls him,
a big gun that walks.
There's a few times throughout this film where the Iron Giant's subconscious programming gets triggered. Time number one was pretty early in the movie, where he notices the gun that the hunters used to kill the deer. That's not him getting mad, upset, or angry. It's really deep rooted into him. It's that original programming of what he was intended to be. The next time he gets triggered is when Hogarth is playing in the junkyard and he points the toy gun at him. He instinctively but unintentionally almost kills Hogarth, and this sends him into a shock. And that leads to the climax of the film, where the Iron Giant makes his way to the city to save the falling children. And from the moment the Iron Giant is exposed to the end of the movie is honestly just peak cinema.
Kent Mansley, United States Government, Unexplained Phenomena Department.
Marv Loach, I'm the foreman.
What happened here?
How Kent Mansley was first introduced in this movie says so much about his character without actually saying it. The government sends him to check on things that are extremely highly unlikely to be possible. In other words, his job is a joke. It's like when you turn on your gaming console and give your kid cousin or little brother the controller that isn't plugged in. And something very obvious about Ken is that he completely understands this, but he is not okay with it.
Tell me again, Mansley, and this time, listen to yourself.
A giant metal monster.
He wants to change the narrative about his life. In his own mind, he identifies as the hero of this story, but he wants to be the hero for all the wrong reasons. He's not concerned about protecting the people. He's not concerned about Hogarth's safety. He's literally running around with a 50-foot-tall, dangerous extraterrestrial threat. And instead of fearing for his life or his safety, all he wants to do is be taken seriously. He doesn't care about any of that. He has a deep-rooted insecurity about feeling like he doesn't matter, and that informs his every decision throughout this movie. Even though Mansley isn't a main character by any means, he has a lot more parallels with the Iron Giant than Hogarth does. They're both a very small part in something that's much larger than them, and as individuals, they're both trying to overcome and rewrite their roles that their prospective systems have given them. Mansley wants to show his worth and that he's capable of more than just investigating BS stories. And the Iron Giant wants to show that he's not just a gun, he's not a weapon, that he's more. They both have really commendable drive and ambition to prove people wrong, but Mansley's intentions are a lot less pure. The giant heard kids screaming and falling from the building and immediately sprung into action without thought. And even though the only two people that he's ever had human interaction with just seemingly turned on him from his point of view, he still wants to help. He wasn't walking around thinking that if he saved somebody, then the world would accept him. He just saved the kids because it was the right thing to do. In comparison to Mansley's situation, he only wants to help from a sense of insecurity. That drive and insecurity eventually leads him to showing himself as the real monster of the story. Honestly, let's just take a quick look back over some of his actions and offenses throughout this movie. So first, he lies and manipulates his way into Hogarth's home. Then he proceeds to toy with and manipulate Hogarth to try to get him to tell the truth. Which sure, no harm, no foul. We can respect that, right? He's just being ambitious. And to be fair, Hogarth is lying to him about a very potentially dangerous situation. But once he realizes he's not going to be able to break Hogarth or outsmart him, guess what he does? He drugs him. He literally takes a chloroform rag, drugs a child, and then interrogates him without his parent present. And he also did this without her consent. Not only is it illegal, it's straight up psychopath shit. And after his illegal interrogation, he gets the whereabouts of the giant and then he gets outsmarted again, which of course leads him to be even more furious. Because for him, this isn't about the safety of the world, it's just about proving that he's worthy. So when the general finally sees the giant, Mansley's first words were telling him that the giant was terrorizing the city when it was clearly just standing there doing nothing. And honestly, the entire city just saw him save the children. They haven't made up their minds on whether or not he's good or bad. But under pressure from Mansley, the general gets his soldiers to start firing at the Iron Giant. And to be honest, we can shoot them a little bit of bail in this situation. This is something that they've never seen before. I do understand the inherent fear in thinking that the giant would be dangerous initially, but Mansley takes things to a completely different level.
Can't! He only reacts defensively. If you don't shoot, he's harmless.
A few moments later.
He says the monster's killed a kid. Sir, we must stop it at all costs.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This causes the general to send everything they've got at the giant and Hogarth. And of course, in the midst of all this, Hogarth gets hurt. This is another extremely pivotal part of the movie. This is when the giant's programming and self-defense instincts fully take over. Outside of this just being a really dope sci-fi clip, seeing the giant transform with his big laser blasters and getting extra armor upgrades, it's also extremely sad. Mansley's been wanting the Iron Giant to be a monster so bad, and he finally gets what he's been asking for. This section of the film is really what separates it from a lot of other movies that have dealt with similar subject matter. So after the general finds out that Mansley lied to him, he has the military stand down. They actually choose to believe that this 50-foot tall weapon was not a threat. I love that we got this moment before the end of the movie. It was a really cool move that they didn't have to make the giant become a martyr to believe him. But just when we think everything is peaches and cream, Mansley just can't accept defeat. He's been playing this cat and mouse game for so long, trying to catch Hogarth and the giant, that he just wants to get a win. So he does the most unspeakable thing that he can possibly do.
Come in, Nautilus.
This is Nautilus standing by.
Launch the missile now!
He was so blinded by his ambition to be a winner that he literally doomed everyone in the city to a death sentence. And he was such a coward that he wasn't even going to stick around. And of course, at this point, we get the best and most iconic scene of the movie where the giant sacrifices himself to save the city. The Iron Giant and Kent Mansley are two very different sides of a similar coin, and they make Hogarth's words ring true in many different ways. You are who you choose to be. That's such a great way to think about life and destiny and your future. Maybe you were brought up in circumstances that weren't the best. Maybe you saw and experienced a bunch of things that kids should never have to see and experience. If that's the type of life you lived, it is very easy, logical, and also probable that you'll grow up repeating a lot of those same patterns that were instilled in you. But the Iron Giant tells us we aren't our programming, we aren't our parents, we aren't our environment. We aren't who society deems us to be. We are who we choose to be. And if that's not inspiring, I don't know what is.